This is the third section of the topic Indian Consuls Act of 1909. In this section, I would like to throw a brief light on the appraisal of this act. This act was passed by the British authorities to satisfy the Indians, but it dissatisfied them. The real motive behind this act was to divide the Indians, to weaken Indian nationalism, and not to provide some relief to the suffering Indians. This act was full of merits from the British point of view, but from Indian point of view and in reality it was full of demerits. And it were these demerits which outnumbered its merits. It were these demerits which made it unpopular even among the moderate sections of Indian Congress. So here I would like to discuss its demerits. Under this act, official majority was established in the councils. In the Imperial Legislative Council, there were total 69 members. Out of these 69 members, 37 members were officials, plus 5 members from non-officials were also nominated. And this raised the strength of the supporters of the government in the Imperial Legislative Council to 42 and made the non-officials a minority in the central legislature. In provincial legislative assemblies, the strength of non-officials was increased, but it was only in theory. In reality, some of the non-official members were also nominated, and they always supported the official circles. In this way, by making this clever move, the government established official majority in provincial legislative assemblies as well. The second defect of this act was emphasis on class, communal, and special interest, neglecting the principle of equality. As it is stated that equality is the basic principle of democracy, and this same principle was neglected under this act. Under this act, representation was not on the basis of equality. Here, representation was on the basis of class, special, and communal interest. Constituencies were divided not on the basis of population, but on special interest and classes. The constituencies were divided into 4 categories: general electorates, where there were different rules for the voters; class electorates, special electorates, and communal electorates. In all these constituencies, different constituencies, there were different qualifications for the voters, and all this shows that this was against the principle of equality and the essence of democracy as well. The next defect of this act was the introduction of communal electorate. For the first time under this in the history of India, the British government adopted the measure for dividing the Indians on the basis of religion. Under this act, Muslims were given separate representation, and this proved very disastrous for the future political course of India. It encouraged the communal elements, and the result of this communal card played by the British was the division of the country in 1947. Then another defect of this act was extremely limited powers of the legislative assemblies. Under this act, the powers of the assemblies were increased, but these powers were kept extremely limited. The members could ask questions, supplementary questions, but could not insist on a reply from the executive. They had the power to discuss the budget, but no power to vote on it. The members had the power to move resolutions, but these resolutions were not binding upon the government, and the government had the final say in all the matters. So Indians were not satisfied with the powers with these provisions. Then under this act, franchise was very narrow, and it was based on discrimination. Different qualifications were provided for the voters in different categories. The voters were first of all divided into different categories. There were general electorates, there were class electorates, there were special electorates, and there were communal electorates. In all these categories of electorates, there were different rules for the voters. In general constituencies, the election system was very indirect. The voters elected the members of local boards, municipalities. They in turn formed an electoral college, which in turn elected the members of provincial legislatures, and which in turn elected the members of imperial legislative assembly. For class electorates, there were specific qualifications for the voters, and only few hundred voters qualified possessed these qualifications. Among the Muslims, voting qualification varied from province to province, and it varied in all other categories of voters as well. But among the Muslims, the voting qualification was kept lower than the rest of the voters. The last defect, demerit, was that under this act, not even a semblance of responsible government was established. As the above mentioned defects show that there was a little chance for the British, and it was done by themselves arbitrarily, not to establish responsible government in India, because the governors and the governor general had final say in all the affairs, who were not responsible to their legislative assemblies, but they were responsible to the British Crown through the Secretary of the State. The executive councils Their members were elected, nominated by the Governor General, and they were responsible to them respectively. So, these were the demerits which made the Act of 1909 unpopular among the Indians, and they started criticizing these provisions, and they continued their demand of responsible government in the successive years. But this does not mean that there was nothing in this act. Certainly there were certain merits in this act. Under this act, the strength of the consuls was increased. The powers of the consuls were also increased. Recognition was given to the elective principle, and this act proved very useful in the establishment of in the path of responsible government. But if we compare the merits and demerits of this act, it were the demerits which outnumbered its merits. So it were these demerits which dissatisfied the Indians, and they started criticizing and opposing these provisions. The result was, within a span of 10 years, the government was forced to announce another proposal of reforms, and which was announced in 1917, and the bill was passed in 1919. This bill, after passing this bill, the act came to be known as Government of India Act 1919. Thank you.